Kanye West is known for his bold opinions and larger-than-life persona, had always carried with him a deep sense of humility. Away from the spotlight, Kanye had a way of living that was deeply personal, rooted in honesty and marked by authenticity. His presence in the world wasn't defined by fame or wealth, but by his unwavering faith and his belief in the value of human dignity. To him, true greatness wasn't found in diamonds or accolades but in how we treat one another, especially those who have nothing to offer in return. Among the people who understood this was Marta, Kanye's housekeeper for many years. A woman of few words but unshakable faith, Marta was often seen wearing a simple cross around her neck, a symbol of strength, faith, and memory. The cross was more than just an accessory to her. It was a living tribute to her mother, Donna Aparecida, who had raised her with resilience, kindness, and an unwavering belief in God. Marta's faith wasn't about appearance, it was a daily part of her life, and her cross carried the weight of her personal story, a story few people ever took the time to learn. At 63, Marta still worked as a housekeeper, finding solace in the quiet strength her faith provided. Widowed for 8 years and a mother of 3 grown children, her life was simple yet profound. Her faith was her anchor, and her mother's cross was her shield in a world that sometimes tried to strip away her dignity. Despite the pain she had endured over the years, Marta had never allowed bitterness to define her. Every day she woke up with a deep sense of purpose, and the cross she wore was both her protection and her strength. That morning, however, was different. Kanye, whom Marta had worked for faithfully for nearly 12 years, had invited her to his mansion for a charity event. This wasn't the kind of gathering Marta usually attended, but Kanye's invitation was personal and kind. It wasn't about flaunting wealth or status, but about being present and making a difference. Kanye had always treated Marta with kindness, offering her coffee in the mornings and remembering the names of her grandchildren. He never saw her as just a housekeeper, he saw her as a person of value. Kanye had asked Marta to come to the event to return a bracelet that had been left behind by one of the guests. Marta was hesitant, she wasn't accustomed to such glamour, but Kanye reassured her, saying, "Come however you'd like, Donna Marta. This house is yours too." Marta's daughter, Raquel, insisted that she get something new for the event, and after a quick trip to the local clothing store, Marta found herself preparing for a night she never expected. On the evening of the event, Marta stood outside Kanye's mansion, the city lights shimmering in the distance. The taxi dropped her off at the side entrance, avoiding the red carpet and the crowds of flashing cameras. She wasn't there to draw attention, she was there to fulfill a simple task, to return the bracelet. As she walked into the grand hall, she couldn't ignore the glances and whispers of the other guests. Marta's simple navy dress and worn shoes stood in stark contrast to the dazzling designer gowns and expensive jewelry. But what caught their eyes even more was the cross she wore around her neck. The whispers began, some curious, some amused, and a few indifferent. But one voice broke through the noise. "Excuse me, are you one of the caterers?" Marta shook her head, but the woman didn't seem to care. She turned away and Marta continued her quiet walk through the room, searching for someone she knew. And then she saw Veronica. Veronica was one of Kanye's most influential guests, dressed in a striking red gown. Marta approached her, but before she could reach her, Veronica's eyes fell upon the cross. "Well, well," Veronica said loud enough for the nearby guests to hear, "if it isn't the Holy Messenger herself." The room stilled for a moment and Marta, unsettled, held out the velvet pouch with the bracelet. Veronica took the pouch with a mock smile, inspecting it briefly before turning her gaze back to Marta. "You know," she said, stepping closer, "it's very brave of you to come dressed like that, with that cross on display. Is it a protest or are you just lost?" Marta stood still, her fingers tightly gripping the cross. Veronica stepped even closer, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "This is a charity gala, not some countryside church service. What are you doing here exactly?" Marta tried to speak, but Veronica cut her off. "That cross," she continued, "it's just a symbol of superstition, of small minds clinging to old stories. It doesn't belong here." Marta's breath caught in her throat. She wanted to leave. She wanted to run. But before she could move, Veronica said something that took her by surprise. "Do you really think that cross means something?" Her words were sharp, mocking, but there was an undercurrent of something deeper, something more painful. Marta felt a wave of humiliation wash over her. She had come here to fulfill a simple task, and now she was being made to feel small, invisible. Her mother's cross, her symbol of strength, was being mocked. Just as Marta began to turn away, something shifted in the room. From the top of the grand staircase, Kanye West stood watching, his eyes locked on the scene unfolding below. The guests fell silent as Kanye began to descend the staircase slowly, his steps deliberate and commanding. Veronica, sensing the weight of his gaze, turned toward him, her smile faltering. Kanye reached the bottom of the stairs, and the room seemed to hold its breath. He stepped towards Marta, his gaze steady and unshaken, and without a word, he took her hand gently. He then turned to the crowd. "I saw everything," Kanye said, his voice calm but filled with authority. "I saw the way you looked at her. The way you mocked her. I saw the silence of everyone else in this room." Veronica's expression faltered, but Kanye didn't look at her. He continued, his voice growing stronger. "This cross she wears isn't just jewelry. It's a memory. It's a story. It's a life. And you all mocked it." The crowd shifted uncomfortably, but Kanye didn't flinch. He turned back to Marta, gently squeezing her hand. "If there's greatness here tonight, it's hers," Kanye said. The room fell silent again. Veronica stood frozen, her eyes wide, as the weight of Kanye's words sank in. The guests who had once laughed at Marta's simple appearance now sat in stunned silence, reflecting on the power of her presence. Kanye continued, his words cutting through the tension. "Tonight was meant to be about charity," he said. "But the true charity is understanding, respect, and kindness. Tonight, the person who has shown the most dignity in this room is not the one with the most expensive gown, but the one who has carried the most weight." Marta, still holding the cross, stood in quiet amazement. Kanye's words were like a balm, soothing the sting of her humiliation. The crowd, now moved, began to stir with quiet applause. It wasn't loud or boisterous, but it was real, an acknowledgement of Marta's quiet strength. Kanye turned to Veronica, holding out a beautiful white gold necklace with a delicate emerald cross. "This is not a prize," Kanye said. "It's a reminder. When the time is right, pass it on to someone who needs it." Veronica hesitated before accepting the necklace, but Marta stepped forward, her voice calm but powerful. "I'll keep my cross," she said. "It may not shine like that, but it carries everything I am." The applause grew louder as the crowd stood, not in admiration for Kanye but for Marta. She had been humiliated, but now she was being recognized for the dignity she had never let go of. Kanye turned to the crowd once more, his voice steady. "True greatness doesn't come from wealth or status. It comes from how we treat others. And tonight, Marta has shown us what real strength looks like." As the applause continued, Marta looked around at the faces in the room. For the first time that night she felt seen. Not as a servant, not as an outsider, but as someone with value, someone worthy of respect. The evening had begun as a typical charity gala, but it had turned into something much more profound. It wasn't about money or status anymore. It was about dignity, humility, and the quiet power of faith. Kanye's actions that night reminded everyone in that room of something they had forgotten, that greatness isn't measured by what we wear, but by the hearts we carry. As Marta left the mansion, her heart was full, not of wealth, but of something much rarer, respect and truth. Kanye had shown her, and everyone else in that room, that true greatness is not found in diamonds or designer gowns but in the simple, quiet strength of a person who refuses to let the world strip away their dignity. And that night, as Marta walked into the Los Angeles night, she wasn't just a housekeeper. She was a woman of worth, a woman whose faith, dignity, and silence had changed everything.